Okay. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Isaiah Diesel at RAG Podcast. That stands for respect, humility, empathy. Those are the values that we're always striving for. We don't always achieve them, but those are definitely worthwhile values to strive towards. And we've got a very special guest today. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Kenneth Leonard.
Yeah.
I'm one of the hosts over at Talk Heathen on the ACA network, and you can kind of find me poking around the internet, doing activism work as a skeptic and a humanist.
You, yeah, we're going to get a little bit into that, but before we do, I want to show you a picture of my best friend from elementary, and tell me if you think you look like him. All right?
All right. Oh, I can see it. Sure, I
Yeah.
can see it. He's a little
One
darker,
more.
but yeah.
He works out in the fields, especially
Okay.
right now. He's got the similar beard.
Hey.
But okay, before we get started, we are going to talk a little bit about your channel and what it is that you do. But before we do, I would like to do a friendly fire round. And you ready for that?
I as ready as I'm gonna be. Yeah.
Try to answer these as quickly as possible.
All right.
This is just kind of to try to break the ice.
Yeah.
And all right, here we go. What is your favorite book besides Communist Manifesto?
Man, that comes. That's tough.
That's Book of Satan.
Today, my friend's girlfriend posted a thing on Facebook that was like, "What's a book that'll change my life?" And I couldn't resist putting 10 books on her poor Facebook page. My favorite book, man, that's tough.
Satanic Bible?
Fiction or nonfiction?
It doesn't matter. Just what is
Okay.
your favorite book?
I think the book that I probably read and enjoyed the most would be, there's a book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell that I just loved when I read it for the first time.
Oh God! Oh my God! We are on an amazing start in Isaiah's epistemology. Outliers is probably number 2.
Okay.
Number one.
Yeah.
Number 1 is The Invisible Gorilla. Have you ever read that one?
No, I don't know that one.
I'll briefly touch on that later on then. But yeah, my favorite book of all time is 1984, but Outliers is number 2, Malcolm Gladwell.
My most recommended book to people by far has become a book called Can't Hurt Me by a former Navy SEAL named David Goggins. I think everybody should read that.
All right, next one. If you could pass one piece of legislation, what would that be?
Ooh, I would love to see a bill mandating. Oh man, that's tough too. Okay, my first thought. I'll just go with my first thought.
Yeah.
Because my second thought was all about like income inequality, but the first thought was if I could mandate education for like elementary school students on like basic critical thinking and epistemology, I would do that, and probably like a comparative religions course, like world religions for like junior high schoolers would be
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay, here we go. How do you take your coffee? Assuming you drink coffee.
So, you know, people are always surprised to hear this for some reason, but I'm a lot of cream, a lot of sugar guy.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Me too. Favorite cream? Favorite cream?
I'm a French vanilla guy. French vanilla coffee mate.
You don't really. I live in South Korea. I'm not sure if I told you that, but I live in South Korea, so you don't really have any of those. You just have like the straight creamer. But okay, if you're gonna die in one country, not the USA, what country would you want to die in?
I want to die in. Well, I love Mexico. So Mexico is up there for me. Yeah, probably Mexico. I'd probably want to be like on a beach, like I'll be down in Playa del Carmen and keel over.
Man, if I was gonna go out in Mexico, I think I'd want to go out in like some of those ancient Mayan ruins. That'd be amazing.
I visited a bunch of those back in October, and it's awesome.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
So if you were in charge of the torture department of the CIA, and you had to put one song on loop to torture someone, what song would that be?
Friday by Rebecca Black.
God.
Yeah.
Wow. That is a great
game
call.
over.
Okay.
We get all the secrets.
Game over. Okay, so real quick, if I did a little bit of research on you, as I told you. And well, first of all, let me back up. Um, have you ever seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so if I were going to compare Kenneth Leonard,
Yeah.
or Leonard,
Leonard. Yeah.
yeah, you are the atheist equivalent of Nurse Ratched
What?
because let me explain. Let me explain. You have like the most. You always have this big old grin, and yet so I mean, this is a total joke, but if you take a look at Nurse Ratched, she's like doing these really sadistic things, but she always has like this really calm demeanor. And I look at you, I'm like, wow, this guy, you have such a cool and collected demeanor, and I really appreciate that. And you always have like a big old smile on your face. You're like, yeah, you're ripping apart people's dreams and religion, and you just have this big old Colgate smile on your face.
Well, life is short. I don't know. I'm thinking about who I'd be in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I think I'd be like Christopher Lloyd's character, maybe DeVito. I don't know.
That movie had a lot of good actors in it.
Yeah,
but on a serious note, can you tell me just a little bit about what it is you're doing, how long you've been doing it, and by the way, all the links for Kenneth are Kenneth, aka Nurse Ratched, are in the description. So your link tree and all your other YouTube stuff are in there, your Twitter. But yeah, if you could go ahead and elaborate on that, and then we'll get into I've sent you the questions. Do you get a chance to check out the questions?
Yeah, I took a second look at them today on my lunch break. So yeah, we got some good stuff to talk about. But so with my sort of online presence, a couple of years ago, I was looking to just get plugged into like a local skeptic or atheist group in Chicago where I lived at the time, and stumbled across Ethan Michael, who's your friendly neighborhood atheist. And he kind of roped me into doing stuff in front of the camera, which was not my intention. And so it started out with debates, which are not really my thing. And then I just ended up becoming very fortunate with being asked to work with the ACA. So over on Talk Heathen, what we do is the whole premise of the show is we talk to people about what they believe and why. So that's it. Yeah.
Nurse Ratched seemed much more intentionally malicious. I don't think in the slightest sense of the word you're malicious. That was like a just kind of an icebreaker joke. It just I'm not going to go into any names, but specifically on this topic, which is why I was telling you before, sometimes we like to talk about innocuous topics or do some icebreakers or even make fun of, sometimes I'll make fun of my guests or make fun of myself, is because, and we talked about this before, but inside some of these talks, they can devolve pretty easily. And especially when you're talking about these topics that are a little bit more serious, you're talking about people's identity, and people can become very offended or triggered, however you want to call it. But the other part of that is what I've strived to do. Not that I've accomplished this all the time, because I am human, but try to have these conversations on the same level as if we were discussing basketball or ice cream, to where just try to separate the emotions and stuff behind it. So yeah, Josh, it was a completely joke at him.
I'll tell you, with respect to jokes, I tend to be a guy who has just like a very wide allowance for humor. So I heard, I don't remember where I heard this, but there was a comedian years ago was talking. He was on like some news panel where people were getting offended about something a comedian had said. And he said that comedians are like daredevils in that they get paid for the attempt. They might not necessarily like land the jump, but they're trying. So to me, most of the time, with some exceptions, if someone's just trying to be funny, then I'm like, all right, cool. Like that's fine. As long as it's not malicious, as long as nobody's being, really hurt by it. So,
well, if you are wondering, this is natural. My hair did fall out whenever I was
you don't have alopecia? You're not?
Yeah, I'm not into anything like that. So you don't have to worry about me slapping you or anything like
that.
Cool.
All right. That's good.
Okay. All right. So I heard your testimony. I'll call it an atheist testimony. I thought it was really fascinating, because I will try to sum this up real quick. You know what a testimony is, right?
Sure.
I
I used to give
sometimes
them at youth
hijack.
group.
I sometimes hijack religious terminology and use it for atheism. Like, for example, I call like probably what you would call a militant atheist. I call that evangelical atheism.
Sure.
But I've hijacked this one specifically, which is testimony. But you had gotten injured in a in a paratrooping. Is that was it?
Parachuting. Yeah.
It just didn't catch.
No, well, so I I've had two bad parachute jumps when I was in the army. So yeah, for those who aren't familiar with the story, I told it probably in most detail on Neil the 604 Atheists channel. But yeah, I had twice where I jumped out of an airplane and it didn't go so hot for me. So the second time I had a parachute malfunction. The first time I just jumped into really bad weather and it went poorly. But yeah, I ended up with a pretty severe concussion. So there's a running joke about how my atheism is directly tied to my brain damage. So yeah.
Oz. Do you know Oz of the Tart?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I interviewed him the first time. Speaking of like trying to keep things friendly, why I make a joke out of him because he told me that he got into an accident and the entire left side of his body was like paralyzed.
Yeah. Oz went through some crazy stuff.
I was like, yeah, well, that explains the atheism. So anyway,
right.
He thought it was funny. But okay. So one thing I found so fascinating about that is because you said, well, you're stuck there in a bed for 6 months.
Well, I wasn't like hospitalized for 6 months. But I spent 6 months in rehab, in cognitive rehab, where I was going to the hospital. So I could still get up and move around. I was only in the hospital for a day or two, but then yeah, it was the during the rehab process, I had a lot of downtime to read my Bible.
I see.
So,
I see.
Yeah,
I see. Speaking of which, I'm going in here for surgery pretty soon. I have to do some rehab on got a torn meniscus. Was breaking up a fight here in South Korea, and I ripped it, so it's been a bit of a pain. But okay, so during that time, you got to, as you said, read the Bible multiple times, and you said you wound up having more questions at the end than answers. Is that a good summation?
Yeah.
And then that just started.
I would say, especially with respect to my position, I was a Calvinist, and with respect to questions about sort of the nature of God, and with respect to salvation and predestination, and yeah, I was pretty spun around after the first read through, and then even worse after the second. Yeah.
So I'll tell you one thing real quick. I became an atheist at Bible college because I started to ask some questions, and then hearing the professor's responses was like, this is really bad reasoning. You know, if you have an analytical mind, some things, or even an ethical mind, something should really make you stop and see, like, am I really reading this? You know, like,
sure.
So I one of the things about this podcast is that I do talk about some of the things that maybe don't make sense about Christianity, because there definitely are some out there. There are maybe some contradictions or some things that certainly we would find to be illogical or nonsensical. And so I do try to address those as honestly as I can, because and some Christians get a little bit uncomfortable with that because they're like, oh, you're questioning the Bible. It's like, man, we need to be being honest about this stuff, because if you just try to present everything as being, oh, hey, this makes like total 100% sense, that's not always the case, you know?
Well, and the truth has nothing to fear from investigation. So, you know, that's the place where I would encourage anybody, regardless of their belief system, to ask a ton of questions, because if what you're aiming for is believing true things, then there's no downside to doubt.
So, jumping in right into these questions, the first question I have for you is, how are you able? Because I genuinely do not understand this about you. The Nurse Ratchet was a joke, but because I have a hard time doing it so myself, because I don't like engaging in debates, because
yeah,
I do, it will get my adrenaline flowing and stuff. and I
Sure.
can either raise my voice or because I am human, even though that's what I try to avoid, getting angry, upset. But how are you able to keep a smile and keep calm even while discussing serious or inflammatory issues? In parentheses, seriously, how the hell do you do so?
Right, right. Well, okay. So first of all, this is definitely something that I want to do much better. As you say this, there are people who I have yelled at and cursed at and stuff who are going, who are you talking about? So you can find plenty of examples where I've missed the mark on that. But I think the first thing is to operate from sort of a principle of charity that moves the conversation away from an adversarial position. Because I don't want to debate against people. I want dialectic with people. And for people who don't know what I'm talking about, in dialectic, we're discussing the merits of ideas and attempting to arrive at truth. So you'll hear me, I sound like a broken record, and I know it bugs some people, but I try to establish that the person I'm talking to wants the same thing I want to, which is to believe true things. You'll hear me asking people all the time, how much do you care about whether or not the things you believe or the things you say are true? And establishing that is important, because once we get there, the conversation, it isn't personal. It's about ideas. It's about methodologies, ideally. And this is where, when I read your question, I was thinking about, have you ever seen the movie Roadhouse?
Is that Patrick Swayze?
Yeah, it's a movie where Patrick Swayze, it's an absurd movie, and it's one of my all-time favorites, where he plays like the world's greatest bouncer. And he's gone to this club, to like this nightclub, to clean it up. And there's a scene where he's having a conversation with the existing security staff, and he's telling them to be nice. If you have to ask somebody to leave, walk them out, but be nice. If you can't do it by yourself, then take 2, 3, 4 guys, but all of you be nice. And he says, remember that it's a job. So in that scene, and it's a brilliant little scene. He's trying to establish that if the goal is a safe bar, then being nice is good for that. If your goal as the bouncer is to be a tough guy and to establish your ego and to beat people up, well, then you're not going to be nice. But you're also not going to have a nice, safe, clean bar. You're gonna have trouble. So to me, that's where it's all at. It's about mindfulness toward a goal. If I'm getting upset, I have to be going, why am I getting upset? There's a time and a place for me to be mad, but is this it right now? My dad used to say, are you raising your volume when you should be reinforcing your argument? So,
wow.
So, and I'm sure that that's not original to my dad. It's just, but it is. I don't know who said it originally, but my dad used to say it to me, and it's that is stuck with me. So that would be it. And lastly, I would say that just ego broadly in these conversations is a big mistake. That when I'm on Talk Heathen and I'm talking to somebody and we have different views, it's not about me. It's about trying to find truth. And I've been wrong about stuff. I've personally held what I now think of as like reprehensible views. I've been wrong. I've treated people unfairly. I've been selfish and short-sighted with people. So when I'm talking to somebody and I can see that they're making mistakes, I know what that's like. So yeah, it makes it a lot easier, because there's a thing that, being wrong, you may have heard other people say this, but being wrong feels exactly the same as being right?
Yeah. Now you're copying, and I'm sure maybe he didn't get this, but Dillahunty. I heard Dillahunty.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the thing. Like I've been watching Matt. I've been watching folks like Seth Andrews and Aaron Ra, for years as I was going through my own like deconstruction and deconversion, all this stuff. So, but there's a lot of stuff those guys have said that it's right, and that's one of them. And if you're mindful of that, of recognizing that being wrong and being right feel the same. When people say I don't like being wrong, what they're saying is they don't like finding out they're wrong, because that's when it feels bad.
Yeah, it's and that could be a devastating it could be devastating to know that, and especially to know that you operated, if you've operated under pretenses that you thought were right, and then you find out later on, as you said, uh, that they were wrong, even about like your judgment about somebody. You think, oh, I thought this guy was a good person, and then they wind up screwing you over. As they say, hindsight is 2020. But
Sure.
I know I look back to who I was 20 years ago, whenever I was an atheist myself, and the kind of belligerence that I had with it. And I told you what I'd call it, evangelical atheism,
Sure.
or militant atheist, where like it was not enough that I just didn't believe myself. It's like I had to belittle other people who didn't. And that's definitely something I try to avoid as a Christian.
Well, and
Now,
there's good and bad reasons for evangelizing with respect to your beliefs. I mean, and I know that I'm going to diverge from how many atheists feel when I say this, but I appreciate religious believers proselytizing to me, because if somebody thinks that, if they're reading the Bible, and the Bible that they read, their interpretation of things, they're not like an annihilationist or something. They think that I'm going to be tortured consciously forever if I don't believe the gospel.
mhm.
Then them telling me this is from their perspective an act of love. It's a good thing. They're trying to help me out. Now I I know that for a lot of people, they just don't want to hear it, and
Mhm.
I understand that completely.
Yeah, I
Uh,
totally get that.
but if you think that somebody's beliefs are not just wrong, but harmful or dangerous, then I respect the people that speak up. Um, yeah, that's just that's just me. I don't know.
Yeah. So okay. So real quick, I do want to mention the other two books that I had talked about for Isaiah's epistemology.
Yeah.
Uh, One of them you mentioned, number two. The other one would be the Invisible Gorilla, and this guy, I can't remember his name right now, but he did this experiment where you're asked to count the passes of the people wearing white
Hmm.
shirts, and there's people wearing black shirts, so you're really trying to concentrate. And halfway through, a gorilla,
Oh
or a
yeah.
man in the gorillas, he
Yeah.
comes out and beats his chest and he walks off. And they've done multiple different versions of this. I mean, one time they literally had a gorilla that was like moonwalking. It
Yeah.
was,
I've seen it where they're
or I
passing
think it
the
was a
basketball
bear.
around, and you're supposed to
Yeah, yeah.
count how
It
many
might have
times the
been a bear.
basketball gets passed. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the point is that when I read that book, and it talked that like half the people, or 60%, wouldn't see that, I absolutely called the BS. But then whenever I started, I'm like, I got to show this to people. So I went and I started showing it to a bunch of people. Probably like the first 5 or 6 people didn't see it.
Yeah.
And what is so amazing about that book, because that's one part of it. He also talks about the Dunning-Kruger effect, and also just about how he calls it, it might be called selective blindness or unintentional blindness,
Hmm.
because the whole thing got started, just to give you some context, is that like this police officer was trying to catch a suspect, and he crossed paths to where these other police officers were beating up a guy really bad, and he wound up getting in trouble for it because they said that he was like having like a code of silence. But he designed that experiment to just show, no, this could, if he was that focused on what he was doing, it's potential that you could miss out on other information. And
Totally.
so if you get stuck on, oh, Christianity is right, or atheism is right, or whatever it might be, you could definitely miss out on things that are like right in front of you, blatantly in front of you, they're obvious. So that's one of the things that I tend to have. I try to have some humility in that I don't know probably 10% of what maybe is even the true message of the gospel or the Bible, because people who wrote it were 2,000 years ago, and the language that they use, the cultural context, there's just no way I'm going to understand that. And I tell you this as someone who's lived in South Korea for 10 years now. I simply do not understand a lot of the way these people think.
Hmm.
So I have firsthand experience with that and understanding the differences between the language and how people translate stuff. So it's just, that's where the H comes in this RHE, respect, humility, and empathy. So
Sure.
I think having some humility, just approaching issues is a really good thing. But um, this leads me right into number two is, how do you think that it's possible that two people can see the same data and come to different conclusions?
Yeah. So with that question, I was thinking about how, with any two people, there's going to be an experience gap. There's going to be a knowledge gap. There may
Mm-hmm.
be an epistemology gap. And all these things factor in, and more. So like an easy example, I think is found in Chicago. I'd mentioned to you earlier
Mm-hmm.
that I lived in Chicago for some
But you're not
years,
a Bulls
and
fan.
was
But
it
you never
not a
told
Bulls?
me.
Well, I mean,
You,
like I
you
like
never
the Bulls.
you
Yeah.
never told me who you liked.
So
Knicks.
okay, I was a big basketball guy growing up, and I grew up in the watching Jordan and the Bulls tearing
Mm-hmm.
things up. But I tended to be a Lakers guy.
Oh, okay.
Uh, so, but
Cali, so.
unfortunately, yeah, because I grew up in San Diego, and San Diego used to have the Clippers years ago. We had the Rockets too, actually, years ago. But
Really?
yeah, yeah. But San
Oh
Diego
my
is like the worst sports town on the planet. Yeah, I said it. If you're from San Diego and you're watching this, I hope you're offended because it's the worst sports town in the United States, bar none. So yeah, but
I'm
now
sorry, I
I
got
like
you
I
so
can't.
sidetracked.
Yeah, I can't even watch pro basketball anymore. I
I
like
know, me too.
I'm that old guy that's like, this is soft. Like I
That
can't.
is
So
so. I mean, I literally just had like an entire hour discussion with this guy. He was saying LeBron
yeah,
is better than Jordan. You
that's
want to
the
talk about
dumbest
some
thing I've ever heard
contentious
anybody say.
issues?
Right.
That's one
Yeah.
thing that could get me slapping someone. It's like, seriously, man. But I
I
will tell you my Jordan story. But I do want to let you get back to, you were in Chicago. I'm sorry to get you
yeah,
off.
yeah. And so okay, so there are people who will point to violence in certain parts of the city, and it's a huge problem. They'll point to the violence in certain parts of the city, and they will know what the cause of that violence is. They will know with complete certainty that certain racial and ethnic groups are just violent. And they'll write off
Mm-hmm.
those neighborhoods and look down on the people who live there.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll have all the comfort of certainty without having done any of the work of acquiring any knowledge about what's going on in those neighborhoods. And the thing that I was thinking about here is that like a racist has access to all the same data as a non-racist,
Mm-hmm.
right? But that thing that I was just saying about the allure of having certainty without having to do the work is attractive. And it's important to remember that our brains, as you were pointing out, are not perfect reasoning machines. There are
Right.
holes in our judgment. I mean, you can look at motivated reasoning, which is the tendency for individuals to process information to fit their conclusions. You can look at confirmation bias. I mean, there's all kinds of examples of cognitive traps that people fall into. Have you ever seen? It's like from the 1950s. There was a football game. It was Dartmouth and Princeton, and it was a really contentious game. But we're talking Ivy League. We're talking smart people, presumably, watching this football game. And psychologists after the game had students from both schools watch tape of the game and answer questionnaires.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see, it's like they're watching two different games based
Yeah.
on their affiliation, how they're judging the refereeing, how, what calls they think are fair, what isn't fair.
Right. Right.
And
That's a really good analogy.
I mean, I think I
I'm not
can't
sure.
remember the name of the study. It's from like 1951.
But
I think it's just called like they watched a football game and then they get into all the questionnaires and stuff. But it's interesting to look at. There's been a bunch of studies like that what we think of as, like our brains are perfect reasoning machines, and what we're taking in is like a crystal clear view of reality. And it's not. And without a set of methods that correct for bias, we should expect people to observe data and come to wildly different conclusions, which is where science and critical thinking come into play.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I don't think you could possibly emphasize the knowledge gap that you need to take into consideration, because I'll just give you one example here. I do missions work in South Korea, and through this time here, I've happened to meet some Mormons, and so they normally come over on Thursdays, and I make them like some kind of dish, homemade stuff that they can't get in South Korea. But we have talks about Mormonism and Christianity, and I've just had. I mean, these guys are 18 years old. These guys have never been out of their parents' homes. They don't have the slightest idea about life, and for me to try to talk to them or reason to them with the lessons I've learned in being a 40-year-old man is just completely unreasonable. So they are very grateful that I treat them with respect, and
they're the nicest people on the face of the planet. Mormons.
Yeah. I've interviewed them, three of them on this podcast, and yeah, that's definitely the number one thing I would say about them. A little bit of wacky beliefs, but like Christians who, they criticize Mormons, it's like, well, they believe some odd, bizarre stuff, and like if you really were to be honest about the stuff you believe as a Christian, I mean, some of this stuff is pretty out there. So it's either out there or just totally inconsistent or contradictory. So if you're being honest, you would have to say that. But I do want to quickly tell you the story about Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Because so my sister, I told her she went to Valparaiso. She went to Santa Barbara, though. She got a full ride scholarship there. She's a lawyer, and she's a politician now, but in California. But so she worked this summer to send me to Michael Jordan camp whenever I graduated. And this is like, oh my God, Jordan was like God. I mean, like God in flesh. Yeah. So he would invite all of like the top college players to be like counselors, and then like just school them at lunchtime. They'd always play like a scrimmage game.
Yeah.
Most unbelievable thing to see this dude in action. Like, wow, up close to like you could like touch him. You know what I mean? Anyway, at one of those games, he went off to the side, and I had my camera. This is way back in the day with like film, and so I went to go try to follow him to take a picture of him, and I couldn't find him. So there was a bathroom there. I'm like, oh, I might as well relieve myself. So I walked in. Lo and behold, Michael Jordan's taking a pee there, and the idiotic Isaiah, this 14-year-old guy, says, "Oh my God, this guy actually pees!" Like, you know what I mean? It was like I was starstruck. But I'm like, I went to take a picture of him. And,
oh shit!
I know.
Sorry.
I turned around, I dropped my camera, and then you ever see those movies where someone like opens the door and there's like a bunch of guns pointed at them?
Yeah.
I had that happen because like, well, they weren't guns, but like the door flung open, all of security guards and the director of the camp, they were all there like, what the hell are you doing? And oh God, it's not the brightest point in my life, but so
everyone judging you has no idea what it's like to be in that position where you're standing in a room with a Michael Jordan like that. Like, I would lose my mind. A friend of mine was golfing in Mexico in a group behind Michael like a week and a half ago down in Cabo, and was like, Michael's here. Was that?
You say you were?
No, a friend of mine was.
Wow.
And she's going, oh my God, we're behind Michael. They're playing like for $100,000 a round. This is insane.
Oh my God.
And I was just like, I would have no capacity for being normal or cool if Michael Jordan was anywhere within like 500 feet of me. I would just be a weirdo. So
moving on to the next question. That's funny. But does it ever cross your mind that you may be doing personal damage to someone by going after their beliefs?
Yeah. So I've thought about this actually quite a bit because it's something that people bring up. And I think that by thinking about it, I've decided no, because what I'm doing.
Wait, hold on. So then it has crossed your mind. The question is, did it cross your mind? Not just whether or not it's true. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. But yeah, so no, because what I do isn't going after anybody's beliefs. What I do is I advocate for a set of principles that are effective for getting closer to true beliefs. If someone's beliefs happen to be false or can't be demonstrated to be true, I think they've got everything to gain and nothing to lose by being disabused of those erroneous beliefs. So that's where I tend to land on that. I actually get kind of mad when people, I've heard it more from atheists than I have from believers of suggesting, well, some people just kind of need to believe things that aren't true. Like they need that. And I don't think that's true. I think it's condescending. I think it's offensive to suggest that anybody needs to believe false things for utilitarian reasons. So that's where I land on that.
So I do want to push back a little bit on that one, because let's just hypothetically say, for an example, because if you take a look at a lot of memes that atheists like to use, they will say some things like, you've probably seen these, like, atheists are good and moral because it's the right thing to do, whereas Christians are, or believers are, moral because they're afraid of something bad happening to them, right? So you'll see that, and then you'll see things like religion, because thinking for yourself is too hard.
Sure.
You will see a lot of these kind of really demeaning and degrading things. But let's just assume for a second that that is true. I don't exactly. There is a little bit of truth to that. Not entirely, but there is some truth to that. But let's just say, for example, it could very well be the case that some people maybe who have some inclinations to do some things, maybe the threat of something as horrible as a hell might be something that might stop them. And I'll just give you like a quick example. You know, the Columbine, like those
Sure.
guys were some pretty like hardcore. I'm not sure if you call them atheists, but definitely like anti-goddess. Like that was one of the things that they were going after, was Christians and jocks and stuff. But someone like that maybe might need to hear something like, okay, I might be able to temporarily avoid some justice here on this earth by just killing myself, but maybe there is a certain element of people who do need to hear, even if it were a lie.
Well,
what do you think?
The place that I go with that is that there are perfectly good secular reasons to be good. There are secular arguments for being compassionate and empathetic and kind, that where you can have a perfectly grounded moral system that doesn't in any way depend on anybody believing anything that isn't true. So while I understand that there is undeniably utility in people like being afraid of hell, for example, I think that by sort of normalizing believing things that aren't true, we open the door to lots of other beliefs that aren't true. So, like, for example,
it's like Pandora's box. Once you open that thing,
so because you can justify anything
Pandora's
on faith. So, the same faith that compels some Muslims to live lives of peace and, harmony and community, the same faith can compel people to do things that are horrible, to immiserate women and homosexuals, or to engage in terrorism. I mean, in the United States, it's Christian terrorism that we see, more often than not. So, the impetus for people loving your neighbor on the one hand and holding other, sort of reprehensible beliefs on the other, are both grounded in the same thing, which is faith. So that's where I go, what are we doing as a species,
Yeah, okay. But let's just, for the sake of argument, are you a father, by the way? Just
not yet,
but
my wife and I are hoping to be in that position soon.
All right. Well, good luck with that. Our daughter just turned 4. So she just started up. She's actually born right in the Olympics.
Nice.
So, yeah, in South Korea, which is amazing, because I was divorced from my wife for 5 years. Came back to South Korea, and then she got pregnant the first night I got back. So, like, exactly 9 months later, she was born right in the Olympics. A very special time for her family. But I can tell you this: I'm not entirely sure how I would respond to that as an atheist if my daughter were to die. God, oh my God.
It'd be terrible.
A couple of days ago, I just went out. I just told you I was in a different town. And so I posted on Facebook about meeting up with a guy. And like an hour, we went out you ever had Korean barbecue?
Yeah.
Oh God, man. Oh, this would be hard to talk about this, but about an hour into the conversation, he just dropped a bomb on me that, like, last year his daughter died of like brain cancer.
Mm.
and she was probably like 10 years old. So I'm not going to, I don't really know how to respond to that one way or the other. If I was an atheist or not, but I'm not sure that's something I could climb back from. I'm really not. Maybe I'm just not that strong of a person, and maybe atheists. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that atheists are stronger people than believers. You could
I don't
understand.
think they are. I
No, but
understand the point you're trying to. You're just for the sake of conversation,
yeah,
but just
I
yeah.
yeah. I mean, I am speaking with charity here because you mentioned things that were or weren't true. And again, when I get down to my epistemology, is that we don't know 99.9% of what there is to know in the universe. So we're all trying to figure things out. And I will get back to that point real quick, but let's just say this is an example that I like to use, but let's just say this was like all the knowledge or whatever knowledge we could gain. And this is what I know because this is like my hand. Okay.
Mhm.
So I put my hand against the wall. That's what I know. And then if I were able to, which I can't, but if I could absorb all your knowledge and put that hand like backwards, but put the handprint on the wall, you would think I would know just yours and mine. But whenever you start to combine that, it would fill in all of these other gaping holes of information. Like I would be able to connect things that I would have never even thought about, seeing things from a different perspective. And living in Asia for 10 years now has really done a lot in that sense, understanding the cultural context that I was raised in. And I'm tempted very many times to say that uh, Asians are wrong in certain areas, but I have to try to say, hey, it's a different way of thinking. It's a different style. Looking into Buddhism or Islam or Hinduism, I've just got to understand that there's totally different thoughts out there, ways to look at the world. And so, hold on, let me see this. This comment says atheists aren't stronger people in that sense. People in general can overcome more than they think. I agree with that, atheists or theists. So, but I'm just saying, let's just set this aside for a second and say, maybe it is the case that someone like me, if my daughter were to die, like I wouldn't be able to function. So maybe I would need to believe, as you call it, a lie, which you don't really know if that is a lie or not. But that might be something that would cause a total collapse in my life. And I have like the atheist response to this, like the carpe diem. You only have this one life. So I think, and I've mentioned this before, I do think, and still manning atheism, I do think that atheism definitely does have some like short-term advantages. That would be one of them, I believe.
Yeah, the interesting thing is like everything that you're saying. It seems to be, if I'm following, framed against the usefulness of different beliefs, where I find myself focusing much more on just on the truth value of the beliefs, because it seems to me that reality is what it is, and it may be devastating having to. I mean, there's so much stuff, right, as adults, that we go through where it's just like, holy smokes, this is a lot right now. I lost my dad a couple years ago.
Really?
And
hold on, 1 week will be 14 years for my mom. She died on my birthday. So,
and there's nothing like losing a parent.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even imagine what losing a kid is going to be like,
That would have to be 10 times worse.
So I can tell you that because I've been in both worlds.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in the world of, I will be reunited with my loved ones in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in the world of, that's it.
Yeah.
And it may sound sort of counterintuitive. It certainly has been, actually, for me when I think about it. But grieving as an atheist is much, much easier, because I don't have any expectation that I'm going to see somebody in the future. I can actually let it go. And move on and process that. So I understand the the impulse that some people have to feel like, well, I just need to feel like I'm going to see them again. I wonder if that's healthy. I wonder if that's good for us. And I wish I could remember it better, but the quote, it's like a Carl Sagan quote where he says, I'd rather, deal with how the universe is than to persist in any delusion, no matter how comforting or reassuring it may be. And I love that. I think that that's good for us.
So let me unwrap this a little bit, because maybe I wasn't as clear as maybe what I was trying to be, but so being a secular humanist or a humanitarian, we should be going after things that are going to benefit humanity, right? I'm saying, and it may be the case that a certain level of the population needs. Now, that does not mean it's true or not. That's not the argument I'm saying.
Right.
But I'm saying, whenever you evaluate what it is you could be potentially doing to someone, this is why I wouldn't go and try to debate a Muslim, and I don't debate these Mormons who come to talk. You know what I mean? We have conversations and I talk to them. I don't want to be personally, I don't want to be the cause of like an existential crisis that someone might go through. Now, dealing with them, they have seen that probably there's something different than your average like Mormon, or the spirituality, like the religion that they have, they have noticed that. And I do like showing a love and compassion towards atheists, Muslim, Jews, whoever it is. But the humanitarian inside of me personally would want to do that. And I'm not saying that says anything about whether or not it is true or not, because I clearly don't even believe that. I don't believe that, Mormonism is true or Islam is true, but that's just not something personally I would want to do. But that has nothing. Yeah, again, I mean, obviously I believe in Christianity because I believe it's true. I've experienced God in my own. I mean, I was an atheist, and so I did have an experience to where clearly I'm very convinced of this being true. And that to me is the reason why I believe it. Not anything extra, I'm genuinely trying to understand. This isn't like a gotcha.
But that's why whenever I have the discussions with people, like what we do on Talk Heathen, everything hinges on truth claims and the truth value of beliefs. So we pretty much don't get into the utility of various beliefs. It's all about, why do you believe what you believe? Like my instinct when someone says they've experienced God is to immediately want to go like, well, how do we figure that out? And yes, that could lead to someone, if I tug on the string and do the Socratic method thing with people, it could lead to some sort of existential crisis for sure. That's what happened in my life when I started tugging on my beliefs. So I think that it would be a bad thing if the community that I'm a part of was just trying to strip people of beliefs and then say, all right, good luck, peace, and then dip. But there's more to it than that. So
let me ask you, have you ever been to Austin?
Yeah. Okay,
so you have met all the people there?
No, I've been to Austin to visit family when my brother-in-law used to live out there. But I have not been out there and gotten to meet most of the ACA people. So I'm going to try to go out there. I want to go to the Formula One race in Austin and go say hi to everybody, Faithless Forum.
I suppose my sister went to law school in Valparaiso, and I went to Bible college in Missouri, very close to Kansas, by the way. It's like right in between St. Louis and Kansas City. But
I wonder where you were at.
What?
I said I wonder where you're at, because my brother-in-law went to college in Columbia.
Columbia. Okay. Columbia, small school. But my ex-girlfriend lived in Texas, so I'd go down there a lot. And it is funny knowing that Austin is like this really liberal place in the midst of this extremely conservative. It's like Bakersfield, where I live. It is extremely conservative place in a very liberal state. In fact, I mean, Kevin McCarthy, the guy, Donald Trump's right-hand person.
People don't realize how California is, man. Like everybody associates California with, like people think all of California is West Hollywood. It's not.
So, I will share with you just one quick thing that really influenced my beliefs about epistemology and everything. But uh, I told you those two books, but then the other one would be Freakonomics, and I can't think
Sure.
of the guy's name right now.
Yeah.
But the point about Freakonomics is you may believe something, and you may believe that there's like a certain explanation for it, and it could be something completely different.
Yeah.
So you know something that's right, and actually, Outliers does a really good job with this. If, for example, in talking about like why Asians maybe are good at math, certainly not a genetic thing,
Yeah. Right.
or why there are a lot of crashes in South Korea, and you
Yeah.
might just think, oh, well, maybe Asians are just
That
or
chapter
Koreans
is
are just bad drivers. And then
fascinating about the Korean Air thing. That is fascinating.
Well, I've seen and lived that out firsthand here. So
My favorite's the one about why certain Jewish law firms are so good at litigation. And people don't realize that for decades that litigation was considered dirty work, and that all these Jewish lawyers couldn't get hired by these white anti-Semitic law firms. So they were sort of forced to do litigation because it was work that no other attorneys would touch. And then all of a sudden in the 80s, the climate changed with respect to legal practice. And now you've got these guys who've got 40 years of practice with litigation, and now it's in demand. So you've got these overnight success stories for law firms that are 40 years in the making. It's awesome. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like we're not like, I think that to some degree that the skeptic community, that the atheist community has an edge when it comes to letting go of ego with respect to epistemology, because I'm not created in the image of God. I'm not the object of creation, right? I don't have any reason to think Jesus died for me. And it's like you read like Psalm 139, where it's like, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, or in Jeremiah 1, where it talks about, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. This stuff, you read Ephesians 1 and Romans 8, and it talks about God, keeping an eye on us through history, and people being, like as a believer, it was easy for me to think of myself as being kind of at the center of the universe. But now it's like, no, I'm an ape doing his best to get along with other apes.
That is a bit of a. I mean, I will say this real quick. That is quite a straw man that atheists used against believers, to say that as humans we believe that we're like the center of the universe, or like God's special creation. Because I mean, if you study Christian theology, you would definitely understand that we are pretty dang low on the ladder. Obviously, we're above animals, but
what's above humans? What's above humans on the ladder?
Angels or principalities, even like a demon would be eons. At least you don't have to believe this is true, but just according, if you're going to criticize something, it would be best to do it according to whatever they're actually teaching.
Well, this is interesting, because so now we can push each other a little bit. So
hold on, let me finish that though.
Yeah.
Let me finish that, because of the fact that the Bible, it says like we couldn't even be in God's presence, because as human beings that would kill us. So we would need to be disembodied or put into a celestial body. Whereas it's clear that demons and angels are able to be in God's presence. But go ahead.
Well, but is being able to be in God's presence now indicative of what the object of creation was?
Can you rephrase that? I'm not really sure what you're asking.
So I'm thinking about it like this, because if we sort of fast forward to the end with Revelation. Okay, so I'll frame the Bible as an act in three distinct parts. So you've got in the beginning in Genesis, and there's only one creature that God goes to the trouble of creating in his own image, that God goes to the trouble of having a relationship with. And that's humans. It's humans who are the reason why Jesus comes and has to die and be sacrificed. The entire message of the Bible is in that, right? And then when we fast forward to Revelation, those chosen humans, the elect, will be in God's presence in heaven. So I mean, there's some sort of delayed gratification there for the humans, but that it seems to me that it's theologically defensible to say that human beings are the object of creation, was for God to create something to have a relationship with
On
that's
earth
more
creation.
special than angels and demons.
Well, you know what? I mean, I would. This really starts to get a lot into the problem of evil, because that seems to be the weakest point of Christianity that most atheists want to attack. And I would say it's not entirely logical or consistent. I will be the first to admit that. I'm not going to sit here and try to defend everything about Christianity, because some stuff doesn't make sense to me, you know.
Sure.
Not to mention Christopher Walken hated humans in the prophecy because God chose humans over angels. Good one, Josh. Do you know this Josh guy?
I do, and Josh is a skeptic and a good dude, and he's got a movie podcast, so he's really? You want to go in on the movie references?
Yeah. Actually, movies and songs are one of the things I reference the most. I mean, I talked about a lot of different.
You should check it out, man. The Bloody Good Film Podcast. It's very, very good.
So this is a very long extended talk, but okay, but like this, it doesn't really make sense why God would create, according to the theology, like perfection in heaven, and then like diminish his creation by creating humans and then insects or bacteria, whatever. Sure. Most people would, as they're creating something, get better, and maybe the last creation would be the best or greatest, and so there is a lot of confusion, if you're being honest, is why God would create humans in the first place.
Well, when God creates everything, he steps back and says it's good. Creation was perfect in the beginning of Genesis, right?
Yeah. This is hard, and it's not completely answerable. Like I do think some of these things are not completely answerable inside of Christianity. Like we can speculate on some things, but I really do not think. By the way, Josh, can you put a link to your YouTube? I'd like to check that out. I'm pretty much movie buff, and I'm from South Korea, so I really like Korean movies.
Nice.
But that being said, it does make a bit more sense if you start to just try to unpack it. What would God be trying to accomplish? And to even, because if you just try to imagine this for a second, if you're in heaven and God is right there the entire time, it's not like you're going to have any doubt that he actually exists, because the Bible describes heaven as God just being like a light that's just everywhere. So says the Bible says you don't need a sun in heaven, because God's presence is just like the air or whatever. So under those circumstances, you can understand you really would not have any kind of free will or any kind of choice in the matter of whether or not you could live in those circumstances or not. And honestly, Mormonism, they might try to answer this just from a more humanistic, logical sense, but Mormonism does way better job at describing that and making logical sense out of it than like straight line Christianity.
This is interesting to me, because one of my favorite books of the Bible is Job. And the parts of Job that I think are the most interesting are the parts where Satan is in heaven talking to God. And so it seems to me that there must be some sort of free will in heaven. There's the option to reject God because, Satan and all the demons did it.
Mm-hmm. Well, this answers, but this hole keeps going further back. You're gonna have to keep digging. You're gonna keep digging further, because then you have to go further. Well, if God created Satan and he already knew that ahead in advance, that ultimately makes God responsible for all the evil in the universe. So then you have to try to factor that in. Well, why is God creating evil? Why would he create death? And I think this is a lot of this speculation on my part, but it does make sense that this time here is for people, maybe even angels in heaven, to understand what loss would be. Like, I just said, my mom, the 13th of April will be 14 years. My mom passed away on my birthday. And if I were to see my mom tomorrow, there's this song by Diamond Rio called "One More Day." Any country song?
Yeah, I know that song.
I'd love that song to be played at my funeral. But it talks in there about this guy. He's given one more day to live, one more day to experience. It's not really sure if it's a girl or like his mom or something. You don't really know. It could be a child. But he talks in there about seeing this person again and cherishing every moment that they have together. And then he says, like, that would be like my one wish, but he says, then again, he says, I know what it would do. It'd leave me wishing still for one more day with you. And so I think if I were to see my mom again tomorrow, or my daughter after 50 years, whatever, if her being dead, being able to experience some kind of loss or setback, that to me would be, if everything is perfect, you just have no way to measure, to balance those kind of things. So anyway, I do want to get on, because we are coming up on the hour.
I'm derailing the whole podcast.
No, that talk.
So what happens? You bring atheists around and they don't respect the rules. They start trampling on everything.
No, you are amazing, bro. I really appreciate talking to you. But how do you personally avoid making assumptions or jumping to conclusions in talks?
Yeah,
more of a personal thing.
It's tough, dude. So like, I think jumping to some conclusions is inevitable. I find myself doing it in conversations all the time. It's probably the easiest way when hosting call-in shows to embarrass yourself. But I think that it's hard to just not jump to conclusions. I think what's easier is to try to be mindful and to not hold on to those conclusions once you realize that wherever you jump to is like shaky footing, right? I would say active listening is important.
Active listening, that's really
right?
cool.
Like listening to understand instead of listening to reply. That's the biggest thing that we run into with callers is we'll start asking questions.
Callers start answering something else. I hear that.
They'll start answering something else. They think that we're trying to humiliate them. They'll think that we're trying to do some sort of gotcha thing. There's certainly show hosts out there who are all about that. They just want to, crush the caller. But that's not what we do at Talk Heathen. At least it's not what we're supposed to be doing. So,
well, we're all fallible.
We are, for sure.
At least most people. I'm not, but
right. So, yeah, but that's the thing is the mindfulness. I mean, if I'm listening to understand and not listening to respond, the response will take care of itself. So I would say, to the extent that I'm able to not jump to conclusions, it boils down to mindfulness.
Okay, great. I see, and that's the reason why I don't like to do debates, because whenever you have that, I mean, I think that's why, at least as far as this podcast goes, is like interrupting and attacking someone personally are like the two big no-nos for this channel. So I that's not, sometimes there's delays. So I mean, it happens, or sometimes I might lose my cool. So I make it very clear, I do not live consistently with the values that I profess as a Christian. Number one, my lifestyle is very inconsistent. I'm a lot better than I was before as a divorced alcoholic, like a womanizer, but there's still lots of flaws that are continually being worked out in me. But the values that I espouse, as far as being respectful, humility, and empathy, I definitely don't always live up to those standards. So that some of that is just a personal characteristic flaw, and some of it is just genuine mistakes sometimes. You know what I mean? Like sometimes in the heat of the moment, I literally think someone's trying to make a point that they're not even trying to make. And then I'll go back and I listen to it, and I'm like, wow, this person was clearly making a different point, but I'm kind of like just jumped up in the moment. And it's hard to process things. And actually, I do want to share with you one thing which gives me humility in talking about these issues, because so when my mom passed away, I had a complete mental breakdown here in South Korea. And I went 2 months to Thailand to do, I mean, if I'm being honest, as much drugs and debaucheries I could possibly squeeze in 2 months. But I went out to I went out to a bar and I was drinking like this beer, and they had this amazing band. You ever been to Thailand?
No.
Oh man, that's an amazing place. But that is because they have all these live bands you just go and you listen to, and I mean these guys are amazing. And I was just sitting there thinking like Thailand is the most amazing country on this planet. And I realized the only reason I was there, at least at that moment, was because of my mom's death. And I thought, how might I be processing this had I experienced this place like a year ago, or maybe 10 years from now? And then I started looking to my beer, and I'm like, wow, like who drank out of this cup? What other batch of brew could have caused a fight or a pregnancy or a car crash? Like all these little things, I just started to realize like I'm experiencing this time, this moment from an extremely small vantage point. And so having conversations just helps fill in this kind of like this puzzle that I was explaining to you back there. It's like, I know what I think. I mean, I know what I think. I know I'm the collection of my experiences, what I've read, what I've interacted with people, what I've experienced with God directly. And so you obviously have some completely different, circumstances, context, thrownness into the universe. And my wife is Korean, you know what I mean? So there's that element. I can't understand. We cannot understand each other all the time. A lot of times.
Well, I have that with my wife too, but just because she's a woman and I just suck. So
how long you been married?
I just don't listen. Like it's the funniest thing. Like I can't imagine how frustrating it must be for my wife when like I'm and actually I'll say this. It's been brought up before where she's like, you're such a good listener when you're doing your shows.
Oh God. Oh my God. Oh.
You're so logical when you're doing your shows.
Oh. That is hysterical. Oh my God. That is wow, that was a good one, bro. I'm gonna have to use that sometime.
It's an interesting thing with our respective perspectives, which is you keep talking about how we know very little in the broad scheme of things, and how you're trying to sort of
1%.
Get a sense of what's on this vast map, right, that we're looking at. And I tend to not worry about that. I tend to, I think of knowledge as justified true belief, and I just want to have justified true beliefs. And if something is outside the scope of justified true belief, then I kind of want to let it go. And you'll hear a lot of atheists talk about being comfortable with saying, I don't know.
Sure.
And it sounds like almost kind of like this throwaway thing that they say,
no, not at all.
But for a lot of us, there's something to that. I don't know. So I've been into martial arts my whole life. And there's a quote from Bruce Lee where he says, don't be afraid of the guy who has practiced 10,000 kicks. Be afraid of the guy who's practiced one kick 10,000 times. And so I try to keep my little epistemic circle very small. And I'm very, very hesitant to be certain about anything. It takes a lot for me to feel like I know what I'm talking about. So right. For me, that giant landscape of the unknown is I'm not going there. It's going to remain mysterious to me.
So the reason why I mentioned that is because it has more to do with dogma.
Sure.
Dogma can be pretty dangerous, but the other reality is what you might think is a justified true belief, in your opinion, could still be wrong. Like
right. It's always tentatively held.
Yeah. I teach history like here in South Korea, and I was explaining to them why some things could potentially be wrong when people are recording history. And I was like, hey, let's just say I saw the principal right behind you, because we're doing it via like this, via Zoom. And I said, and then you asked me, where's the principal? And I'm like, well, she's clearly there. She's there. But it could be the case that she's maybe fallen in the few minutes that I didn't see, and then she's been taken somewhere else, like the hospital or something. So it's like you might consider that justified true belief, but it's possible to still be wrong about things.
Sure.
And so if you only know, if you don't know 99.9% of what's out there, chances are there is a lot of things that you believe in that are just they're not accurate. Here's an example. You mentioned Carl Sagan. I could pull up footage of Carl Sagan saying that the universe or the Milky Way is 30,000 light years across, and yet today astronomers are saying it's 100,000 light years across, and yet we don't know they say it's between 100 million or 100 billion or 400 billion stars that are out there. So it's like that's a pretty big range of not knowing, and perhaps never going to be able to know that answer. And so there's some things I think whenever I've grown up and I've learned some facts or I read a book and I'm like, have I gone like my entire life not knowing these things, And when I realized that, I'm like, I've actually been believing that this thing I believe is true, maybe just be some kind of fact or something. And then I realized that it's not true. And I'm like, God, I was pretty dogmatic and pretty arrogant in that, believing that, talking about this. And then I just have it totally rattled. So that's kind of one good.
Like and I think this is a thing that has grown over time, where people feel like their beliefs and who they are, like their sense of self and the bundle of things that they accept as true are one and the same, and that an attack on someone's beliefs is an attack on them.
I've had that happen.
Yeah, and there's some literature out there in the world of like social psychology that is interesting with this, but yeah, I think that that's a mistake for anyone ever with any belief. If someone's not able to separate who they are from what they believe, I think that's a problem. So I think it's a barrier to sound epistemology, because it makes it harder to change your mind. Saying my belief was wrong becomes essentially the same as saying there's something wrong with me.
Right. So my last question I have to you is a bit of speculation.
No.
I sometimes ask questions that can't really be answered. It's just more of like, what do you think? Because I interviewed atheist pastor Oz atheist pastor, and I asked him like what percentage of like Christians or ministers would you think have like lost their faith and are just doing it for the paycheck?
Yeah.
So that's like a completely separate, like there's no way you can actually know. It was just more of kind of like asking. And this is a little bit of speculation. But how long do you think is average for someone to deconvert from whatever they have and becoming an atheist and make it through a stage of anger and or guilt? And again, this is speculation. Do you think most atheists are stuck in this stage?
Well, I certainly don't think that most atheists are stuck in an angry or sort of guilt-ridden state. I tend to think that the meme of the angry atheist is a bit unfair. It becomes a catch-all for believers who don't want to engage honestly with atheists to take any objection or criticism to whatever and write it off as anger on the part of atheists. I've experienced it firsthand, where I've asked somebody, hey, you're claiming X. I don't know how you get there. Can you tell me why you think X is true? And to be met with, what are you angry about? Who hurt you, Kenneth? And I'm going, nobody. I'm fine. I'm just talking about, what you're saying here.
Right.
So
that happened to me.
There certainly are angry atheists out there. There are people who, that's like their whole shtick. It's branding for certain people to be angry. But I think some of that's performative on certain channels, but who knows? That's me speculating. But you
watch MMA, Colby Covington?
Yeah. I
He's
was
totally
actually
not like
talking
that
to
in
a
real
guy
life.
about him just the other day. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
talking to somebody. I was like, he's selling pay-per-views with half the crap that he
Yeah.
says. He doesn't even believe it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Totally.
he's following the Trump business model of just, there's no such thing as bad press kind of thing. Get people watching, get people talking, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you're able to capitalize
Clever.
on that. So yeah, whatever. But with respect to the deconversion thing, there's a lot of factors. The first thing that comes to mind is there are bad reasons to deconvert, just like there are bad reasons to convert in the first place. So one of the things that I really hate is when I hear atheists say, I'll go like, well, why aren't you a Christian anymore? And they're like, well, I just found such and such about Christianity reprehensible, so God doesn't exist. And I'm going, that doesn't
That's where I
follow.
was.
That's not how this works. Like I may be glad that somebody their moral intuition seemed to be firing with respect to certain beliefs, but I don't like X, Y, and Z about Christianity, therefore there is no God, does not follow. That is fallacious. That's a mistake. And that person's deconversion is going to look very, very different from someone like me who, like, I was an evangelical Christian. I wanted to stay a Christian, but I could not square what I was reading in the Bible with what I was learning and observing about reality.
Yeah.
So I've described my deconversion process as feeling like a close friend of mine had died. It was very difficult. And so I went through all these different stages of sadness, of anger,
the actual grieving process, like.
Yeah, and I don't know if it exactly mirrored. Certainly, there was denial involved.
Yeah.
For me. So it was a couple years just getting from theist to deist to atheist, and then probably an embarrassing amount of time, like a 6-year period of being just pissed off and angry and stuff. So
you were, wow.
Yeah. So, like if you were to talk to me as an atheist in college, when, when I'd gotten out of the Army and I was going to school, I was a much bigger pain in the butt and was just mad. I was mean at that time. And I think that when I like, it's interesting because like there are legitimate reasons that some atheists have to be mad. And I think that working through that is positive for them, as long as they're not, being abusive to anybody in the process. So like I can understand the anger. I can understand sadness. I can understand, all these different emotions that people experience in a deconversion process. It is hard. But in terms of putting an average on it, the person to talk to there would probably be Neil, the 604 atheist, because he's interviewed, like, I don't even know how many people to talk about deconversion stories at this point. But his channel has been very useful because people talking about what that process has been like for them is good. It lets a lot of us atheists out here feel like we're not alone. We weren't weirdos for going through what we went through. Yeah.
Any chance you've ever seen Squid Game based in South Korea?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So the guy, the VIP, the naked guy.
Yeah.
His name is.
I've got that image in my brain again now.
Yeah, I know. I can't remember his name right now off the top of my head, but anyway, he came on our podcast because I happen to know
what the naked VIP guy.
Yeah, we interviewed four of the VIPs. One of my friends just happened to be one of them, and he introduced me to other people. But the point of that is, like, we interviewed him because he's actually like believes in Hinduism.
Oh.
And T Jump had like questioned something about his belief about how do you know, and he used a really good analogy that was brilliant, because, like, let's say someone had never experienced chocolate, and then you try to describe it to them, and then you realize you can't really describe it, and then, like, you take a bite of it and you're like, oh well, that's what chocolate is,
Sure.
Because I grew up like a minister's kid, so I got religion shoved down my throat, down my throat. I was like strong-armed to go to Bible college, and I had no desire or intention to do it. I was interested in history and education, So I totally know that feeling. I know the feeling of, even I was an atheist who would actually still preach for my parents to make my parents happy. It's such a bad stage of my life that I couldn't be honest with myself or honest with my parents, you know. And actually, the last time I saw my mom, I told her I didn't believe in Jesus. And 4 months, it was for Christmas. I went home for Christmas. She didn't want to talk to me because of that, you know. But I mean, then 4 months later, she died, like on my birthday. So it was like I really regretted that was the last time I saw her, you know. But then again, once I had the experience, I was just like, whoa, that is totally different than whatever you're taught in Bible college or whatever you are reciting. It just, I couldn't be any further from a reality than, I mean, it would just be kind of like if I just try to describe to you what fatherhood is going to be like, it will do no justice whenever you actually see a blob up on a screen and be like, whoa, I created that thing, you know? It's just a totally different, it taps into a completely different side of you. And so I use that analogy when talking to like these Mormon guys. Like, there's nothing I'm going to be able to tell these people about marriage or, you know, loss or hardship when they were 18 years old. I wouldn't have understood anything at 18 years old. You know? So, do you have any last thoughts? And if you could tell me where we can find you.
Well, yeah, people can find me over on Talk Heathen. Got a couple episodes coming up at the end of April. I'll be doing. I don't think I'm allowed to say yet. I found out today that someone's going to be guest hosting with me that I'm really excited about. I think the producers would yell at me if I said it, so I'm going to keep it under wraps for now. They don't yell at me. The producers are very, very sweet at the ACA. Shout out Katie and Greg. Love you guys. Yeah, I mean, like I pretty much stick to the ACA, or I'll go over and do stuff for good friends usually. So like I go over to Ethan's channel, Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist. I'll do the Bloody Good Film podcast with Josh. We did an episode recently about Tango and Cash, one of the all-time great movies. Yeah,
Kurt Russell, was that Kurt Russell too?
Yeah, exactly. I'm
a movie buff,
so there you go. But yeah, that's it. I mean, my whole thing is just wanting to have, you know, good faith conversations with people about what they believe and why, and to stick to that, and to encourage people to be as honest and as thoughtful as possible. So I feel like I'm pretty safe. You know, I will have a positive effect on the internet as long as I can stay in that lane. So that's where I'm going.
Do you think that was charitable today?
Yeah, this was perfectly great. I would totally do this again.
I, on behalf of the other Christians who genuinely, I mean, you the guy's name is Gary Milne. I'm not going to use the name that he actually goes by because that's ridiculous. But he actually, and this is actually my first interaction seeing you, because you're like having this conversation. You have this big old Colgate smile on your face. But you said immediately afterwards, like, hey, look, if this is what you really believe about the Bible, like, shouldn't you be wanting to spend this time to talk to people like Arden? Because that was just horrific, and I actually called him out on the Tom Rabbit's channel multiple times. But the way
it's wild. I'll tell you. So in the couple years that I've been doing stuff online, there's nobody who I see who is more misunderstood and who gets more hate and toxic nonsense thrown their way than my trans friends. You know, Arden, Katie, Ben, Bree. Like there are so many people who I've gotten to know who it's unbelievable what gets thrown their way. And when I was a believer, you know, there are things that are said in church, like, you know, they will know you're Christians by your love, things like that. I think with the gentleman you're referring to, I tried to talk about fruits of the Spirit with him.
His name's Gary. Yeah, that was brilliant.
Yeah. And I do my very best to stay out of like internet drama. if there are people who I disagree with what they're doing, I tend to just try to not draw attention to them. There are
Yeah.
plenty of people who will, you know what I mean? So, but it is always a little confusing to me when I see believers who take an approach that is not like what when I was a believer would have thought of as like a spirit-led type of approach. And the Christians will know what I'm talking about when I say something like spirit-led. So yeah, I don't know. I tend to people who are aggressive and mean, I tend to just be like, oh, you guys, you do your thing over there. We're going to be over here talking about, you know, what people believe in, why, in a different way.
Well, I have had about 10 different conversations with Plus members on this channel, and I'm very cognizant to be aware that this is an abused class of people. So we support anti-bullying campaign here. So that seems like something that's interests you. So we'll make a donation to your name.
Awesome.
We've donated a few $100s to them so far, but yeah, we can. You know, I definitely through these conversations. Do you know the Bryces, right?
That sounds familiar.
Tart. He's with Oz.
Yeah.
I call him the Bryces wrong, but that's a little something we got going on. But he's came in and we've had some conversations about the trans issue, and he's definitely opened my eyes up to some of the, even if I'm not intentionally trying to be abusive, and it is from my vantage point is completely out of concern and care for these people, but he's definitely told me that some of the language I use is either abusive or just uncharitable. So he's coming on this week, actually just emailed me today, and he is going to give a critique of the talk that we had on the LGBT and tell me where I might be wrong or where I could improve it. And
that's awesome. I grew up in an era where I was obsessed with basketball. All I did growing up was play basketball. And when you're playing ball, you know, and you're in playgrounds and you know, rec centers and stuff in Southern California where I was growing up, homophobic slurs were thrown around like it was nothing. You know, if you listen to hip hop back then, I mean, it was nothing. There was no consideration whatsoever for who you might be harming with your language.
Right.
And so I look back at where I came from as an evangelical, totally homophobic, you know, completely. I had a lot of growing to do, and I owe so much over the last few years to friends of mine who are in the trans community, who were patient with me and who who helped me out. I mean, friends like Vila Bianca were I had so many questions. I didn't understand, you know, gender and you know, when people start talking about, you know, things like being non-binary, you know, they'd help me out and explain things to me, and all it took was me going, okay, look, I don't know what I'm talking about in this world. I don't want to hurt anybody, and I want to understand. And that was it, and that's enough. And in my experience, if people come to the door with that attitude, my trans friends are the coolest people on the fucking planet. The language, you told me before about the language, but I'm sorry. They're just excellent people.
Shit happens.
They're just excellent people. And yeah, to me, when I see people who aren't receptive to trans people, who have some sort of bias or animosity or prejudice against them, I'm just like, they're missing out because the community is rad. So
so I do want to. This is gonna be the last thing I say before I give a little plug. But in Bryce and I's conversation, we were dead naming and misgendering someone who I had not spoken to for about 3 months, and in that time, she had I don't say decided. I don't know what terminology you'd use there. I don't know what it's.
I mean, I think that I mean, and I'm not speaking for the trans community, but and there are people who can answer questions much better than I can. I mean, you can call the Transatlantic Call-In Show, and people, you know, Katie and Arden are there and eager to talk to anybody. But people are in a process of discovering who they are, and that's the thing.
I don't want to use language that they're going to be upset about, but let's just say she came out as being trans and we were just unaware of it. And Bryce is a member of the LGBT community, so a lot of people were saying some really bad stuff like, "Oh, you're dead naming, you're doing this," and so I because that person in particular spent at least around, and I'm very grateful for this, 10, 15 hours in sometimes some difficult conversations, and there's a lot of ignorance on my part. And so that person really helped me to understand that adopting pronouns and trying to understand where they're coming from, you know. And so those conversations were extremely helpful. And so very big shout out to Marshmallow. I'll call you Marshmallow, and big apology coming from me. But that being said, we definitely want to thank you for joining us today. Kenneth, you're an amazing guest. You can check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, YouTube, pretty much anywhere you can find someone, you can find us. And so we're having conversations like this. If you'd like to talk to us, you could check us out. Send us an email at regpodcast@gmail.com. Our website's up right there. Let us know what you thought about this conversation. And we're having conversations like this that we're just sometimes trying to move the conversation along. And so we're not trying to solve everything overnight. And if you could stick around for 1 minute after this outro.